this prayer this morning in Jesus' name. Amen. So I've titled the topic today, What in the World Are We Doing Here? What in the world are we doing here? We're here. What does that mean? Is there something, does it have some further, is there a connotation? Is it associated with something deeper? Is there a real meaning? And so there's a tremendous opportunity for us to connect with our real purpose and our real meaning. And when we think about the world and we think about people where they're at in their life, in secular society, in business world, in the social world, the political world that we live in, there's a great longing and a searching for meaning, and lots of people just don't have that. I wonder if we have the next slide, please. I'll pause. I can't quite read what's written at the back, unfortunately. It's a bit too small, so we'll have to wing it a fair bit. So I've said, what on earth are we doing here? What does it mean that we're here on this earth? And lots of people have nowhere to go. They don't know what their life means at all. And yet we as Christians, we do know exactly what we have been asked to do. And the work is twofold in a way. So we are to live in the world, we are to serve in the world, and we are, so we have responsibilities there, and we have been asked to be holy. What an amazing thing that is, that we have been asked to be holy. It's a beautiful thing to ask to be holy. And this is, the request is from a holy God. What an awesome thing it is. What an absolutely awesome thing it is. Perhaps we could just turn the slides off, because I won't be able to follow them, and God will help me. So, I mean, I could twist my head every time, but I think it's probably better just to turn it off. Yeah, so we've been given a responsibility to live in the world, but not to assimilate ourselves in the world, not to get involved in the world to the point where our own identity is obscured and disappeared. So we've been given this challenge. It's a pretty tough thing. It's like if you get a piece of chalk and dip it into ink and then pull it out and break the chalk, you're going to find that the ink has infiltrated the edge of the chalk. It might still be chalk on the inside, white, but the chalk on the outside it'll be contaminated by the ink. And it's very difficult this day and age with modern communications not to be able to, be contaminated by the world. And yet we've been given a brief, we've been given a responsibility, and here we are. And just like that chalk, it's impossible without some sort of a protective barrier to make sure that the ink doesn't touch or change the appearance and the virtues of that piece of chalk. So if you had a piece of Glad wrap, for instance, and you put it there and you dip the chalk into ink, but it's got Glad wrap on it, then you pull it out and the chalk has not been damaged by the world. And so we have this remarkable challenge in our own lives that we've got to live in the world, serve in the world, and we've got to proclaim the good news. We've got a wonderful news to share with the world. When the announcement was made that Jesus was coming by the shepherds on the hills so long ago, they were happy because they knew it was hope and it was good news. They were bringing good news to these shepherds on this hill. It would have been just an overwhelmingly emotional experience for them, but they had this incredible thing that they were exposed to. Just sitting around, maybe they were talking about the Messiah. Who knows what the conversation, how it was unraveling. But suddenly there was heaven was open before them, and they sang praises to God, and they brought good news, and good news for everyone. And so these shepherds had an opportunity to be exposed to that. What a wonderful thing it is. And you and I, we have that same good news, that same hope, and the same message and responsibility that we have to share this wonderful news. So it's good news. If you're bringing good news to someone, telling them something amazing, well, you're going to be happy because you know the reaction you're going to get. And our world has fallen off the ladder a bit, and many people are struggling to find meaning and purpose in their life. And it's just a very sad thing that people have lost the plot, so many people. And the world has changed, and it keeps changing. It's interesting how over time there's different ideologies and religions that come and go. And so in postmodernism, there's a pluralistic kind of society that we've inherited, and there's a lack of conviction and commitment to any particular creed or religion or understanding. It's like there's many different types of ideas that are floating around, and we are sort of encouraged to join and get caught up in all of these amazing things. And unfortunately, it's just really hard not to get caught up on it. The world media with print and radio, and probably more so than ever today, television is really infiltrating our life. It's just an amazing thing, just how deep it goes. Thank you, Jeff. I can read that a bit now. This global village, and even the best shows on television, there's often immorality in the background. There's relationships which aren't stable. People are in trouble, and they just, there's a searching and an emptiness there. And so there's one kind of morality that's affecting everyone across, particularly the Western world, but it's reaching in many ways right across to people in third world countries around the world. And so there's this monoculture that's developing. Thank you, Jeff. So where do we stand as Christians exposed to this postmodernism, this plurality, this like any idea goes, and there is an expectation that we all respect each other's ideologies, we all respect each other's religions. So there's 3 points up here on the screen that a lot of these issues are raised about, in the context of the rights of people, particularly minorities who may not have had many rights, legal rights perhaps. And so should we as Christians stand for protecting the rights of minorities? Of course we should. People need freedom, and we're all about freedom and freedom of expression, and maybe that's changing a bit. But yes, Christians should support people's legal rights and to give them power and give them the vote. What about community goodwill? Absolutely. Christians should be right there at the forefront of community goodwill. What about intellectual openness? What about intellectual openness? So that would imply that we would be open to any idea about the meaning of life, and so that we would be not just tolerant of the other person's idea, but we would allow that idea to be part of what we take on and what we believe as well. So intellectual openness is a concern, because we believe that we have a solid rock, we have been given a brief, and we know what on earth our lives is about. We know what we've been put on the earth to do. And so that is that we are to live in the world without compromising our values. And there's tremendous pressure on us to bend and sway, because we're just totally immersed by this ink that can change and stain and change who we are. Thank you, Jeff. So John Stott, who was an Anglican theologian, he referring to this pressure for us to change our values and our beliefs and our ideology and practices, our way of life. He's saying if we capitulate, then our integrity will be compromised, and it will blunt our testimony, and it will suffocate our spirituality. So these are concerning things for the Christian world, that our integrity would be compromised, and that the story that we've got of God changing us and how what the good things that Jesus has done for me and what he's done for you, our testimony, our story, which is something people can't argue about. It's what happened to me, and if I share it with people, it's my story. I tell my story because it's full of what Jesus has done for me. And so our testimony will be blunted if we compromise and allow the coloured ink of the world to change my identity, change my colour, change my way of life. And our spirituality would gradually become more and more suffocated. And so there's a quote here that I wanted to share with you. The greatest want of the world is the want of men. Now, please read that, men and women. This was written in a time when women didn't have the vote. Men who will not be bought or sold, who in their innermost souls are true and honest, men who do not fear to call sin by its right name, men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle to the pole, men who will stand for the right, though the heavens fall. So this is a statement about someone who has their feet firmly planted on the rock of Jesus and who are not going to be changed, not deviated, not compromised. They're not going to be able to be bribed. They're going to know their role and they're going to stick to it. And we've been given that opportunity. I want now to turn and follow the narrative in Exodus 33. This follows the remarkable story of how God came down on Mount Sinai and he spoke. And it was the most terrifying experience for the children of Israel. They were told to keep well back from the mountain and keep animals away, otherwise they would not be able to survive. And then the 10 Commandments were given. So they heard the voice of God as smoke came down and fire on the mountain. And yet, when shortly after that, Moses went up into the mountain and spent more than a month, 40 days with God, they felt lost without Moses to lead them. They had seen the miracles, what had happened down in Egypt. They had these incredible stories that they could share with their children and children's children. But there they were, and they were saying, well, maybe we're not going to see Moses again. He's disappeared up in the mountain. Maybe God consumed him. God sounds pretty awesome and scary, and who knows what happened. And so they managed to twist Aaron's arm, and Aaron, he showed his weakness by not being a leader, and he allowed them to create this image, this golden calf, which they worshipped. And so when Moses came down with the 10 Commandments, it would have been heavy. A stone is very heavy. So regardless of how thin they were, it would have been quite a thing to carry them down the mountain. When he saw what had happened, he was just devastated and threw the commandments down, and the stone tablet broke. And so this was a deeply distressing situation for Moses, but even more so for the God who had rescued his children from Egypt. And so just picking up if we move to Exodus 32 and verse 31, these people, what a great sin these people have committed. And they have made themselves gods of gold. And now, says Moses to God, now please forgive their sin. But if not, then maybe blot me out of the book you have written. So he's basically saying, well, I'm prepared to sacrifice my life to give these people hope. What an unselfish man, and what a humble man Moses was. Moving down into 33:1. So the Lord said to Moses, leave this place, you and the people you brought up from the land of Egypt, and go up to the land I've promised an oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So God he's not owning the people anymore. He said, these are the people you brought up from Egypt. And Moses, he knew that wasn't right at all. It was God that brought them up. But God was showing his humanity in a way. I mean, we know that we are made in the image of God, but God goes through a lot of the same sort of emotions that we go through. The terror, the fear, the love, the adoration, the delight, the joy, all those fruits of the Spirit. And so God was really upset by what had happened, particularly on the shoulder of all those incredible miracles that he had done. And so he said, this is verse 2, I'll send an angel before you, and the angel will drive out all of these tribes. And he said, then go up to the land flowing with milk and honey, but I'm not going to go with you because you're a stiff-necked people and I might destroy you on the way. So God was saying, I might just get so mad, I'll just say, forget it, and might destroy them. And so Moses shared these things with the children of Israel, and when they heard what stiff-necked people they were and they realized what a sin they had committed, then they were very upset, took their jewelry off and stopped wearing their flashy clothes that the Egyptians had given them. And so now just moving down into verse 11, and the Lord would speak face to face with Moses in this tent of worship. And then when he would go back to the children of Israel, his face was still glowing because he had been in contact with God. And he wouldn't have seen God's face. Now, we know that for sure from the verses that follow, but he was close to that pillar of cloud that God would have been in. And so it was an impressive thing, and the people, they were afraid to look on Moses' face, and so he used to cover his face a lot when he'd been there talking to God. Now, just moving down into verse 13. And so Moses said to the Lord, you've been telling me, lead these people, but you've not let me know whom you'll send with me. So, we just read that God said, I'm not going to go, but I'll send an angel and he'll clear out these other tribes, these sinful tribes. And so Moses wouldn't accept that. And he says, you've been telling me that you know me, but you haven't told me who you're going to send with me. And you've said, I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. So if you are pleased with me, please teach me your ways so that I may know you and continue to find favor with you. Remember that this nation is your people. So Moses is coming back to God and saying, these aren't the people that I brought up. These are not my people. These are your people. And he's saying, you haven't told me who you're going to send with me. And what a gracious God, and how forgiving he is. In verse 14, God gave up and he said, my presence will go with you and I will give you rest. My presence will go with you and I will give you rest. So Moses, he was very happy about that. And Moses said, if your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. Otherwise, how will anyone know that you are pleased with me and your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth? So if we go back to verse 13, teach me your ways So Moses wanted to know what God's ways are, how he should live his life, what are the ways that a godly person would want to live or that they would live. And then he goes on, he says, well, don't send us up from here unless you are going to come with us. I mean, God had already just said, my presence will go with you. But he said, don't send us up unless you're going to come. He said, because otherwise, if you don't come, no one's going to see that we're any different from any other nation around about. And he said, what else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth? So you can see here that Moses knew full well that if God was with them, their behavior would be different. Their way of life would be different. Their customs, their traditions, their practices, their values, their beliefs, their attitudes, the way that they would behave, everything was going to be different if God went with them. And you and I have the same opportunity. It's the same God. So if we go with our God, then, and he stays with us, Jesus said, abide in me, abide with me, live with me, stay with me. And so we must stay with our God. There's too much noise and distraction in the world. But if we stay with our God, then we will be different. The choices we will make will be different. Our busy lives will become a little simpler. We won't be saying yes to so many things that are often very unimportant. And so our lives would have much more clear direction. And things which we used to value, we no longer value so much. And new things are coming into our lives that we do put a higher value on. And so our time, the way we spend our money, and the talents that God's give us, the choices will be different. And where we are today is largely because of the decisions we have taken in the past. And what a wonderful thing it is that we do have an opportunity to make decisions for our God and to live a life on this earth that is going to be a great witness and a credit to him. And I want so much that God would be pleased with me and that he could take some delight in the decisions I take and the way I ask him to come into every aspect of our life. Thank you, Jeff. So this is just a verse that followed on the next book, Leviticus. And so the word is, give the following instructions to the people of Israel. I am the Lord your God. So he's identifying that he is their master. He is their God. And so he says, the message was, so do not act like the people of Egypt, where you used to live, or like the people of Canaan, where I'm taking you. You must not imitate their way of life. So God's saying, you've got to live a different life to the people there. And so, yes, you'll be living and serving in the world, yes, but you have to be godly. You have to be following the way of life which is going to honor me. Thank you. Similar message here in Romans. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. And now what I love about this verse, so it's looking at the way of life again, but he's saying, let God transform you. So I think it's a human characteristic that we want to be in control and in charge of our lives. And we want to do it like the 2-year-old who grabs the spoon off mum and wants to feed himself. We want to do it all by ourselves. And so we want to work hard, do the things that look like what our concept of what a godly person is like. But here in this verse it says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. And then it says, let God transform you into this new person. And so when we're so determined to change, we want to do it all by ourselves, but it's never going to work. And I think many of us would have fallen for the idea of trying to do godliness, trying to be good, trying to be righteous all by ourselves. It just doesn't work, because his aim, his ideal for us is just so much higher than anything we have. And again in Philippians, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. So we are to be like Jesus. This is the goal he's given us. This is the challenge. This is the godliness that we need so desperately. Thank you. This is another Ellen G. White quote. When a man turns away from human imperfections and beholds Jesus, a divine transformation takes place in his character. He fixes his eye upon Christ as in a mirror which reflects the glory of God, and by beholding, he becomes changed into the same image from glory to glory, even as by the Spirit of the Lord. So again, it's very clear. So all we have to do really is fill our mind with a picture of Jesus, and slowly over time we become changed into his likeness. So we start to reflect his image from glory to glory. So it goes higher and higher in godliness, and it's done by the Spirit of God. In Ezekiel, we're given this is a key verse that I'm sure you all know, and it's an easy one to remember because it's Ezekiel 36:26. So I'll give you a new heart. It's a promise, because God knows my hard heart, and I need a new heart every day. So this is the prayer I typically pray every morning, that I just beg for this new heart. I give God my old heart, and I ask for his Spirit, a new spirit in me, and I want him to take away my stony heart out of my flesh and give me a tender, responsive heart. And so this is key to change in our lives, when we're prepared to relinquish control and let go of who we are, this selfish, rebellious Malcolm Ray, and we are taking on a new identity with a new heart and the new spirit being in us. Now, this is my new favorite Bible verse, has been for a couple of years now, and it's a pretty remarkable kind of thing to try and get your head around, because this is Jesus speaking. I have loved you even as my Father has loved me. Remain in my love. So how could it be that Jesus is saying that just like my Father and me, my Father loves me, that's how much I love you? How could that possibly be? I have loved you even as my Father has loved me. Just as he loves me, I love you. So Jesus is saying that his love for us is so intense that it's somewhat parallel with the love that the Father has for him. And then he goes on to explain, when you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you will be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. Joy to the full. And so he's explained this to us so that we'll be happy in our lives. So we shouldn't be moping around and trying to be good, righteous on our own. No, he is prepared to do the hard yards to make the changes as we look to Jesus, as we spend time contemplating him, as we read and understand and meditate on him. He will make the changes, so we don't need to make those changes. So thank you, Jeff. And this is an ideal. Where might our goal be? Higher than the highest human thought can reach is God's ideal for his children. Godliness, God-likeness is the goal to be reached. Before the students, there is opened a path of continual progress. So it's bit by bit, one step, one one rung on the ladder at a time. They have an object to achieve, a standard to attain that includes everything good and pure and noble. Thank you. And so, also love this very well-known verse here. Let's settle this, says the Lord. Though your sins be like scarlet, I will make them as white as snow. Though they are red like crimson, I'll make them as white as snow. Isn't that an amazing verse? If you could just pause that, Jeff, just for a second. So if we look back to Exodus and we go through to, we continue this narrative just very briefly. And so after Moses heard from God that my presence, God said, will go with you and I'll give you rest. And so God assures Moses again. He says, I'll do the very thing you have asked because I am pleased with you and I know you by name. So identity is tied up with the name. And God's saying, I will do the very thing you have asked because I am pleased with you and I know you by name. Oh, if only I could hear those words from my God, that I am pleased with you and I know you by name. What a wonderful thing it would be if I could hear God's voice and God said to me, I'm pleased with you. I mean, I really want to make God pleased with me. I want to bring joy to his life and to make him happy with me. And because he knows me by name already, but what sort of a name is it? And what am I doing in the world? Is the way I live my way of life, the values and ideals that govern me, the values I have, is it reflecting a godly me? Well, more and more, I hope so, as God, from one rung on the ladder to the next, he's changing me little by little. Now, Moses had the audacity then, when he heard this reassurance from God, he said, it's human curiosity now. Moses says in verse 18, now show me your glory. Whoa, this is a pretty amazing thing. So Moses says, now show me your glory. What's God going to say when he had the cheek to ask to see his glory? And yet God humors him in verse 19. I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. But, he said, you can't see my face, because no one can see me and live. So God's glory is so incredible. A human body and mind can't take it. We just do a major meltdown. If Moses, who expressed an interest in seeing God, then he's not going to be able to handle it. But God said, no, I'll let it happen. And so it was some time later that Moses went back up to Sinai. And then the Lord, if we flick over to 34 and verse 6, and so God passed by in front of Moses. By the way, back in verse 21, he said, I will have my glory pass in front of you, however. And he said, and I'll shield you in a bit of a cave, in a cleft in the rock. And as I go past, I'll cover you so you can't see my face. But as I walk away, you'll have a glimpse of my rear as I walk away. And so that's the promise that God made. And so this is what happened in verse 6 of 34. And so the Lord, and he proclaimed his name. This is his identity. This is who he is. This is the godliness that we are to aspire to. The Lord, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness and rebellion and sin. And yet he doesn't leave the guilty unpunished. So I just want to go through this a little bit and look at these characteristics of who God really is. So he's a very compassionate God. He has a soft heart towards us, and he's very gracious. So there's no roughness about him. He's a smooth and a gentle, gracious God. And he doesn't get mad really easily. I know some people, they're walking emotional tightrope sometimes, and one little breath of ill wind and they'll fall off their tightrope and they will explode. But God is not like that. He is slow to anger, and he's abounding in love. I love this word, abounding in love. Not just he's loving, but it means he's kind of like, he's just so full of it. He's exploding. The love can't be contained. He's abounding in love, and he's abounding in faithfulness as well. So he's very faithful. I love the concept of loyalty. And I have some very close family members who are very loyal to me, very faithful, reliable, and God is like that. But more so, he's abounding in faithfulness, and he maintains love to thousands. So his love is all-encompassing, all-reaching. Is just an amazing God. And then it goes on to say that he's forgiving, and he's forgiving of wickedness and rebellion and sin. And it's interesting, he doesn't just say, if you've done something wrong, I'm forgiving. No, he enumerates. So he explains, I forgive wickedness, rebellion, and sin. So no matter what you or I've done in our lives and how ashamed we might be of it, no matter what it is, he just sweeps it away so easily. So easily, he can just sweep it away. Remember when there was a crowd trying to get into the house where Jesus was, and some people brought a paralyzed guy, and they couldn't get anywhere near Jesus because he was on a sort of stretcher, I suppose. So they climbed up on the roof, pulled the roof off, and they dropped this man, lowered him down right in front of Jesus. And Jesus realized this was an amazing thing. They couldn't pull the roof off without making a fairly big racket. And all the people would have thought, what is going on here? Stuff would have been falling down on them. But Jesus looked, and he had compassion on this person. And just with the sweep of a hand, he just sort of said, I forgive you of your sins. So he knew the person's heart. And in those days, there was a sense that if you had something tragic happen to your health, you brought it on yourself because of your lifestyle. And perhaps in this case it was true. But Jesus said, I forgive you. And that's how easy it is, no matter what we've done. And in our lives, when we do something rebellious or we do something that we know is wrong, and so I'm talking to all of us, especially to myself, you remember the details of many of the sins you've done in your life. God doesn't. But you remember it because the limbic system kicks in. And the limbic system in our brain, it has the function of emotions, your emotional control. And it has also the automatic nervous system as well. But it also, so it has the memory and the emotions are two major roles of the limbic system. And so if you're doing something wrong, sneaking something, stealing some chocolates as a child from your parents' larder or something when you know you're doing it wrong, you kind of remember these details because the limbic system is responsible for the emotional highs and lows in our life. So something really wonderful or scary or frightening or something, you'll remember these details. I remember going to work in a school in western suburbs, and we were doing school screening in a community health program, walking down the corridor of the school past all the lunch bags, and the leather smell of the fresh leather was so strong, and I felt very insecure all of a sudden. And I realized it was because of the smell, this was associated with the emotion of me first going to school as a little 5-year-old. And all those fresh bags, leather bags in those days, it was for everybody. And you'd smell that leather and I think, whoa, I just felt so scared. It was amazing. And it's because the limbic system kicks in and it's the emotional stuff that we remember. And when we do something bad, it's in our memory. And even though we remember it, God just says, no problem, I forgive. It's forgiven. It's forgotten. And as far as the east is from the west, which is a pretty long way, I'll put your sins away. What an amazing thing. We also have a wonderful view, a description of God. If we look, and I don't have this on the text there, but in Galatians 5, the fruits of the Spirit. So this is also godliness. So this is part of the free gift we get when we surrender to God and ask for the new heart, new spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So these are all gifts that are freely available to us. So this is another picture of God. This is casting the vision of who we are. Thank you. Perhaps you can kick in those last couple of slides now. Thank you. Our time is just on the blink. Now, when Jesus went and met John the Baptist, and Jesus insisted that John baptize him in the Jordan, and Moses pushed back and he said, no. He said, look, I should be baptized by you. And Jesus said, no, let's do the right thing. Please baptize me. And so when Jesus was then baptized, then this voice of God the Father, came from heaven. And God spoke to Jesus and said, you are my dearly loved Son, and you bring me great joy. Oh, how I want to hear those words. I'm sure you do as well. That God might say to me, you are my dearly loved Son, and that I would bring him great joy. I'm sure that's a prayer that you would share with me. And this is how God related to his Son. And remember that we are loved by Jesus in the same way that the Father loves Jesus. Just as the Father has loved me, I have also loved you. And he says, abide in my love. This means we dwell in it. We hang on those words. We stay with that love. So we're not to wander off after having a quick 5-minute prayer in the morning with our hand on the doorknob, ready to rush out into the world and be alone for the day. No. And more I'm praying to God that he will teach me the meaning of this stay with you, abide with me throughout the day. And I love what Muhammad shares in our Sabbath school class out the back, that every act of our life when we are surrendered to God is an act of worship, including going to work, driving the car, eating food. When our whole life is surrendered to God, it is an act of worship. Thank you. And we'll just wrap up here, a couple more slides. And so you and I have been chosen, and we've not been chosen for an ordinary, boring Monday life. No, we've been chosen. And why? We're called royal priests. Now, if God called me a priest, I would be overwhelmed by that. But we're not just priests, we're a royal priests. And he regards this church as a holy church. And God has this possessiveness and an ownership of us, that we are his people. We are like a light on the hill, the salt to the earth around us. And so when we live a loving, outgoing life, but we are not going to be corrupted, we're not going to compromise our integrity and blunt our testimony and suppress or suffocate our spirituality. When we are strong and our feet are solidly on Jesus and we live the life that Jesus would have, then it's very clear to the world around us that we know what on earth we're here for. And the last slide, thank you. No, there's two more. So what in the world are we doing here? Am I living and serving in the world without compromising the values and ideals of godly way of life? By God's grace, am I living like Jesus, growing more like Jesus, reflecting who he is? And the last slide, thank you. So, the still small voice. What has God been saying to you lately? So when you think back over the last few months, rushing about your life, doing all these things, do you have some sort of a sense that God is saying something to you lately? And so it's good to ask this question, just to think about it. Has God been saying, make it up to that person, make that phone call, go and visit so-and-so, someone's suffering, they're in trouble, make contact with them, support them, pray for them. So whatever it is, when you talk to your God and he requires obedience from you, he wants you to do something, sometimes it's too scary. I've had scary moments in my life where I've had to, God's been asked me to do something and I've put it off. But later on I realized that it was a mistake to put it off because God had already solved the problem. We're often worried about what's going to happen if I do this or that. But no, just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. That's spiritual integrity, isn't it? God tells you to do something, you leave the consequences up to him, and you just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. So thank you very much for worshiping together. I know our God is blessing us, and we are doing his work in his way, and how wonderful and what joy that is for him as well as